I'm playing Banjo Kazooie. The only thing that could make this any better is playing an actual banjo. But I don't own an actual banjo, nor do I know how to play one, so this is the best I can do. The only thing that could make this even better is selling out to Microsoft. That doesn't sound right. Selling out to Microsoft. Who wrote this script?
You did.
Don't you lie to me!
I sat there and watched you write it.
For those of you who don't know, the company behind the original Banjo-Kazooie, Rareware, had created some of the most beloved games for the Super Nintendo and N64, such as Donkey Kong Country Series, GoldenEye, Jet Force Gemini, and so many others. But in 2002, they were bought out by Microsoft. Then they went downhill. Then they started talking about working on a new Banjo-Kazooie game, talking about bringing back the classic platformer that was on par with Super Mario 64. And when the game came out, instead of tricky platforming and countless collectibles, they were given Lego cars. Microsoft done went hyped up the fans only to slap them in the face with a flaccid sausage. Longtime fans were furious, and rightfully so. I, however, can't share in this rage because I didn't grow up with the original game. The closest thing I could compare this to is the Darksiders series. I loved the first two games, which played a lot like Zelda. Then Darksiders 3 was more like a Metroid Dark Souls hybrid. While a decent game in its own right, it's not what I wanted from a Darksiders game, which led to disappointment. And now that Microsoft has bought out Bethesda, they'll probably turn Fallout into a dating sim and The Elder Scrolls into a point-and-click hidden object game.
Dragonborn, search this room. You must find a soul gem, a dragon scale, and my penis.
My first experience with Banjo was at my cousin's house. I was 3 years old and he hands me a controller shaped like a mutated banana and says, "Here, play Banjo." Then I spent the whole time trying to walk up a hill only to slide back down, and it wasn't until very recently that I legitimately, and I use that word loosely, played the first Banjo-Kazooie, and after seeing the huge difference between that and Nuts and Bolts, I have some understanding of people's completely justified disappointment.
But that's enough about why people hate Nuts and Bolts. I'm here to take a more in-depth look at the latest installment of the Banjo-Kazooie series. Let's go!
You start a new game, and the first thing you see is a look back at the first two games, while a narrator tells you the story of Banjo, Kazooie, and their nemesis, the witch Gruntilda. Then it reminds you of how many years it's been between Banjo-Tooie and this game. Then an obese Banjo and Kazooie go to investigate a sound that was caused by Grunty's still-living skull. Then the Lord of Games, or Log, shows up to give you a classic Banjo-style challenge that he interrupts after 10 seconds to insult your nostalgia. Then he whips you into shape and gives Grunty a new body and introduces the whole thing this game is built around. Then you end up in Showdown Town, which serves as the main hub for the whole game. After enough tutorials to make your kidneys fail, you get your first Jiggy, which unlocks the first level. Then you're free to earn more Jiggies, which you get from completing challenges given to you by the characters standing around. Some challenges force you to use a pre-made vehicle, most of which suck, but I guess that's just part of the challenge. Most challenges let you use a vehicle that you built yourself, and depending on what you build, the challenge could be incredibly easy or impossible. Like this one where you have to protect Mr. Fit from the robots. I had a hard time fighting them all off, so I made a box on wheels to cover my blind spots while shooting the enemies in front. The reward you get from each challenge depends on how well you perform, usually meaning how fast you can finish or how well you protect this doofus. The lowest reward is some notes, which is money. The middle tier gets you a Jiggy, and the best reward is a trophy. Getting 4 of those earns you an extra Jiggy. Challenges like this encourage creativity and force you to change your approach. If your vehicle doesn't work well, try a different one, or modify it so that it does. Then you go back to town and have to get your jiggies out of a gumball machine and put them in the jiggy bank in the middle of town. But it's not that easy. If the cops see you transporting jiggies, they come to harass you. You'll never take me alive! At the start of the game, you won't have a lot of vehicle parts to work with, which is why you have to explore the hub. You find these purple crates all over the place and bring them back to Mumbo, who opens them up and gives you all the parts inside. Some of them are just sitting out there in the open, and others are hidden pretty well or require a bit of platforming to reach. It's not exactly classic Banjo levels of platforming, but you have to plan some of your jumps. And you can also find these jiggy tamper switches hidden around town, which add 1 jiggy to your score in the bank. I would rather it just be a jiggy that I found, but it serves the same purpose. As you collect more jiggies, you unlock more acts in the levels you've already opened, and new levels, of course. But to open them, you need to take a ball from Log's Video Game Factory and put it on a thing to unlock the level itself. And the further in you get, the harder it gets to bring the ball to its thing. There are 5 levels in the game: Nutty Acres, Log Box 720, Banjo Land, Jigaseum, Sports Land, and the Terrarium of Terror. Each level has its own theme, and the characters wear different costumes and act differently. Each level is pretty well designed, except for the sports one, having many different ways to traverse them. Of course, you could just use a plane for most of them, but it would be more fun to use a land-based vehicle. Like in the Log Box, there are so many roads and elevators. It's a very vertical stage, but it's also too cramped for a plane. Or you could just use a helicopter.
That covers some of the good aspects of the game. Now let's move on to some of the bad.
Why does each level have so many doors that lead to it? Each door is a different act, sort of like Super Mario Sunshine, but that game has 1 door for each level that takes you to a menu to select the act. I get wanting to keep the player from getting that far into the stage prematurely, so you could just have that act grayed out and say, you need this many platypus testicles to unlock it. Now look at the size of this level. It's enormous, and they barely put anything in it. There's just a few jiggy challenges. You don't even have to look very hard to find them because they're marked on the map. The only incentive you have to explore the level is finding the Jinjo challenges, which aren't important. They only give you bingo tokens that can be used to win additional vehicle parts, and finding notes, but you get more than you would find scattered around just by participating in the challenges. The levels feel so empty and lifeless compared to the hub. There's so much to do there. Find the Mumbo crates, hidden jiggies, break Jinjos out of prison. If they could make the hub so lively and full of content, why couldn't they do the same for the levels where you would be spending most of your time? What were they thinking? And why do all the jiggies have to be won from these challenges? They could have put in some special enemies just wandering around that drop them when they die, you know, like the original game. But no, it's all challenges all the time. No exploring or solving puzzles, no secret Mumbo crates hidden, just talk to this guy and boil his egg in a volcano. And what's with this loading screen tip? Have you been playing for a while and don't like the vehicle-based gameplay? Then maybe you should buy Banjo Kazooie on Xbox Live Arcade. I think I'll stick to emulating the game because I don't want to give Microsoft any more of my money, thank you! I do appreciate the wide variety of challenges available. Instead of making them all races or just break the other guy's vehicle, there's a lot of different challenges like knocking over dominoes or killing a giant inflatable dinosaur. And then there's the grunty challenges. Completing one of them will get you an upgrade for the vehicle you use in town. There's high grip wheels for driving up slippery slopes, a spring for jumping, a laser for murdering the police. Each one grants access to more parts of the hub, allowing you to find more of the hidden collectibles that are nowhere to be found in the actual levels. Once you've banked enough jiggies, you open the door back to Spiral Mountain, where Log gives you one of the most difficult challenges in the game, where you have to do a series of different challenges, all with one vehicle, and he asks you questions between each one. Every correct answer gives you more time. Then there's the final challenge from Grunty, where you blow up a series of her vehicles while also using only one vehicle. After that, Log gives Banjo the deed to Spiral Mountain, and Grunty spends the rest of her life working in Log's video game factory and swears to have her revenge in a game that she makes herself. With the story finished, there is still some fun to be had playing around with the vehicles, and that's where I had the most fun when I played this game years ago, because when the game fails to deliver, you just have to make your own fun. Get it? You actually have to put some thought into your vehicles if you want them to work properly. Like if you put the wheels too close together, you won't be able to control it, and the best you can hope for is sending a cow to space. If your vehicles are made poorly, that's how they'll perform. Poorly. Which can lead to some pretty funny results if you just slap things together. This thing here is my attempt at recreating a vehicle my brother made years ago that he called the Koontz. Sadly, the original Koontz design was lost to a faulty Xbox. Spinning around to and fro, I wonder where the Koontz did go. There it is! The only thing limiting you is, of course, the parts you have to work with, and your imagination. You can build a plane, you can build a train, an unstoppable war machine, this thing I called Clark Dupenstein, a motorcycle with a monstrous tire, you could build a dumpster fire. While I do have more nostalgia for this game than the original, after playing the original, I can easily say Microsoft dragged Banjo down. They could have made a third Banjo game following the original formula, and this could have been a spin-off game where you play as Mumbo trying to stop an evil gorilla wizard from taking a dump in the Grand Canyon, and it probably would have been received better by fans. We can't let some magic monkey drop a deuce! Let's build some cars! But instead, they staked the entire franchise on this, and said if they don't like this new thing, they just don't want Banjo anymore. The fans do want Banjo. They don't want what Microsoft did to him. That's why some of the developers of the original game left Rare, formed their own company, and made Yooka-Laylee. Don't get me wrong, I actually, unironically, like this game, but compared to the original, it falls flat.
If they could ruin Banjo like that, God knows what they'll do to the Bethesda games. Microsoft needs to be stopped.